Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Sachapi yata purusho vishvastiti udbhavapaya muktiappa mayamayesha sete sava guhashaya. Please also explain the personality of Godhead who lies in every heart as the supersoul and as the Lord of all energies, but is untouched by his external energy. Prabhupada's purport. Undoubtedly, the form of the Lord who was seen by Brahma must be transcendental. Otherwise, how could he simply look upon the creative energy without being touched? It is understood also that the Purusha lies in the heart of every living entity. This also requires proper explanation. Text 11. Purush savaya ye loka sapala puru kalpitaha loke amushavayava sapalye iti shvishuma. O learned Brahman, it is formally explained that the planets of the universe, all the planets of the universe with their respective governors, are situated in different parts of the gigantic body of the Virat Purush. I have also heard that the different planetary systems are supposed to be in the gigantic body of the Virat Purush. But what is their actual position? Will you please explain that? So now we're on text 12, chapter 8 of the second canto of the Bhagavatam. Also, please explain the duration of life between creation and annihilation, and all other subsidiary creations, as well as the nature of time, indicated by the sound of past, present, and future. Also, please explain the duration and the measurement of life of the different living beings known as the demigods, the human beings, etc., in different planets of the universe. Prabhupada's purport here. Past, present, and future are different features of time to indicate the duration of life for the universe and all its paraphernalia, including the different living beings in different planets. Om Jnanam Tiridam Dasha Janangala Shalakaya Jakshu Om Minisamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam. These three verses here, we can immediately tell, can we not? There's a lot in them. There's references to the universal form. There's references to the various Purusha avatars, different Vishnu incarnations there. Not incarnations, Purushas, as well as other things about the planets and Lord Brahma's lifetime and so forth. There's a lot there. And I don't think we can go into any one subject in any depth, but I will do what I can this morning. Because what happens is that you read the rest of the Bhagavatam, especially by the time you get to the fifth canto, and most of these questions in more detail are being answered. Especially the fifth canto, chapters 19 to about 29. It's all about the universe and the planets, and those who know me well know I'm fascinated by that. But if we turn to, first of all then, a little bit about the Purusha avatars, the Vishnu forms, we read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila 252, translation and purport. So the verse is, superficially we see that these Purushas have a relationship with Maya, but above them, in the fourth dimension, is Lord Krishna, who has no contact with the material energy. Prabhupada's purport, the three Purushas, Karanadakshay Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and Shiradakshai Vishnu, all have a relationship with the material energy, which is called Maya. Because through Maya, they create the material cosmos. These three Purushas, who lie on the Karana, Garbha, and the Shira oceans, the milk ocean in that case, respectively, are the super souls of everything that be. Karanadakshay Vishnu is the super soul of the collective universes. So that would be what we call also Mahavishnu, who's breathing the universes in and out of the pores of his skin. As Garbhodakshai Vishnu is the super soul of the collective living beings. Of course, Garbhodakshai Vishnu lies on the Garbha ocean, Garbha meaning womb or birth. And Shiradakshai Vishnu, who's lying on the ocean of milk, is a super soul of all the individual living entities. So I guess another word for that would be the super soul, actually, the super soul. But the roles in these Vishnu Purusha avatars, Vishnu's coming down ultimately. His form is spiritual, but he has the role of maintaining the universes, ultimately, in these three different forms. And he expands. At the end of the day, he does things. How can we comprehend a humanoid form breathing in millions of universes at the pores of his skin? What to speak of how can we truly comprehend Vishnu be able to expand into each universe as Garbhodakshai Vishnu, then further expand into to accompany actually the soul the jiva into every living being. It is incomprehensible to us, but this is the explanation. Something quite different, of course, just concentrating on this universe, is the Virat Purusha, or how would you say, I think Prabhupada describes it as kind of like, almost like a material description, I got a nod there from Jainitai, which is usually a good sign. Jainitai Prabhu, sorry. That the super soul, the Virat Purusha, or even the universal form, is almost like something that's personal and impersonal at the same time. We know that Arjuna witnesses the universal form in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I'll read a little bit out to you, but obviously just to get an idea of what that experience was like. Krishna says, "You cannot see me, Arjuna, with your present eyes. Therefore, I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic opulence." Arjuna saw in that universal form of Krishna unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. The form was decorated with many celestial ornaments and bore many divine upraised weapons. He wore celestial garlands and garments, and many divine scents were smeared over his body. All was wondrous, brilliant, unlimited, all expanding. If hundreds of thousands of suns were to rise at once into the sky, their radiance might resemble the effulgence of the Supreme Person in that universal form. Of course, Arjuna, bewildered and astonished, his hair standing on end, Arjuna bowed his head to offer obeisances and with folded hands began to pray to the Supreme Lord. He says, "Although you are one, you are spread throughout the sky and the planets and all space between, O Great One. Seeing this wondrous and terrible form, all the planetary systems are perturbed." What happens after that, in the Gita, of course, is Arjuna says, "Actually, you know what? I prefer you as my friend. You know, that time I was feeding you sweets, I was massaging your feet. Yeah, that's okay. But this universal form, that is just my hair's on end, and stop it, please." You can imagine how absolutely the whole of the universe kind of presented to you in its material sense, all in one go, all in one place. Absolutely mind-blowing, actually. And as surely that Arjuna said, "I prefer your personal form." So from that universal form came the four-armed form of Vishnu. But actually, what did Arjuna want? The two-armed form of Krishna. So Krishna continued his transformation there before Arjuna's eyes, from the universal form to the Vishnu form with the forearm, with the Gada, the disc, the conch. But actually the most desirable, most personal form, actually, one without so much awe and reverence, is that two-armed form of Lord Krishna. with his flute. This is surely the most beautiful and attractive. But it is necessary in the scriptures that we understand that Krishna is more than a blue boy with a flute. Because look at these other forms. As Vishnu, he is maintaining the creation. But look at this. Look at the universal form. But it's actually described, that this is impersonal in the sense that it is a meditation for those who are perhaps, who struggle or who have been on the impersonal path. A meditation to understand the greatness of the personality of Godhead. Thus, chapter 11 of the Gita is very important in that context, because it's not easy to understand how can anybody be so powerful, in a sense. But actually, all of that power, all of that responsible for the creation and the annihilation and all the planetary systems and all the living beings within it, are in some way coming from Lord Krishna in that sense. A little bit more, actually, slightly later on in the Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavatam, Canto 3, 6, 4, Prabhupada's purport. Prabhupada writes, the Virat Rupa, or Vishwarup, is a gigantic universal form of the Lord, which is very much appreciated by the impersonalist. It is not an eternal form of the Lord. It is manifest by the supreme will of the Lord after the ingredients of material creation. Lord Krishna exhibited this Virat or Vishwarup to Arjuna just to convince the impersonalists that he is the original personality of Godhead. The Virat Rup is not an eternal form exhibited as in the spiritual sky. It is a material manifestation of the Lord. So in other words, it's basically confirming what I just said. But there's so much more in these verses, because Sukadeva Goswami has been also asked to speak on time and creation. So we've dealt with the Lord's relationship with the universe. Krishna is kind of aloof from it. So is Vishnu, actually. Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva do kind of get more involved, let's say. Just like you imagine there's a corporate company somewhere in Wall Street or London somewhere, and you have the guy at the top, the CEO, or someone who's even above that, Mark Zuckerberg, or I don't know, something like that. He's not directly involved on the shop floor, so to speak. You won't find Mark Zuckerberg working in, directly involved, because he's too powerful in a sense, because he's the origin. It's a very bad example, but you know what I mean. So Krishna is responsible for the material manifestation, but you have these creators and sub-creators that are ultimately designated, let's say, lower down in the hierarchy, but they are designated to deal with us. Even us, we have a little bit of power. We may have a pet dog. We shouldn't really have dogs, but anyway. Or scientist in a laboratory may have a petri dish where he's experimenting with various bacteria or something like that. That's my science. That's as far as I remember my science lessons at school. Little petri dish, or we may have a little bit of controlling, or we have a little bit of control over our back garden, or whatever it is. But actually, that's very small. But we are miniature controllers. But there's demigods that are above us in the universe who have greater control. Indra, Vayu, Surya, much greater control. Greater control than them is the Lord Brahma. Where does Lord Brahma come from? The navel, of course, of Garbhodakshai Vishnu. So like that. So let's learn a little bit here. Bhagavatam 2.10.46 purport, which is continuing from the last text that we're doing today, number 12. Prabhupada is writing here about kalpas. In the Maha Kalpa, the Lord assumes the first Purush incarnation as Karana Dakshai Vishnu, with all the potencies of the Mat-tattva and the 16 principles of creative matter and instruments. And all of them are products of Mahat, or materialistic ego. Mahat-tattva, meaning illusion, that what is not, or also ego. The first element in this universe, actually, before the earth was created, and all the sound and earth, water, fire, air, ether, and so forth, was ego. So it gives you an idea of what to expect in the living entities in this universe. Ego. Ego is the fundamental subtle element It's why we're here. So therefore, the ego is most difficult to control. Well, the mind is difficult to control, but connected to that, of course, is ego. Ego basically means it's not just about wanting to receive gratification or glorification or to be the center of attention. In a more subtle way, ego means I want to be separate from Krishna. I want to be identifiable as I am Krishna's competitor, in a sense. That's what ego is. Krishna is the original. Krishna is the origin of all. Krishna is the center of everything. He's the original person, the supreme self, and we are miniature ones. And if we deny that, or we act in denial of that fact, then we are acting upon our ego ultimately. And it pervades the universe from the very beginning. All living entities have their little, even the dog barking, down the street. He's got ego. He's protecting his territory. Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. All animals have it. Human beings, of course, we have it too, albeit slightly more subtle. Actually, these days it's not even subtle, is it? Let's continue with Prabhupada's purport. The creation of Brahma in each day is his life, is called kalpa, a kalpa. In other words, just one day to him. Because as you go up in the universe, as you go to the higher ranks, the higher corporate ranks, if you like, of the universe, time is experienced differently by different levels of gods and demigods. So, i.e., a day to Lord Brahma, who's at the top, if you like, of the universe, of this universe, creator, is a day for him. For us, is something in the region of 4.32 billion Earth years. Talk about relativity. So those demigods that are in between, or for example, you have Gandharvas or Kiranas, or of course some of the controlling demigods, their experience of time is somewhere in between, in some of the planets between the Earth and Brahmaloka. So this is a great example of relative time experience. Just like, I don't know, I see an insect. That insect may last a few hours, but to him that's a lifetime. So it's relative to consciousness as well. What is time? Time is something that's experienced by a conscious entity. And we divide it up into days and nights, and we even add seconds and milliseconds. The purport continues. In the upper planetary system, the duration of one complete day and night is equal to one complete year of this Earth. This is accepted even in by the modern scientist and attested by the astronauts. So Prabhupada here is picking up on a modern example where astronauts are sent into the space station or whatever, they go around the Earth a few times, and they actually experience time differently to us. For example, for them, you go to watch, maybe say a day goes by, they come back, they find that 2 days has gone by on the Earth, simply by leaving the atmosphere of the Earth, which is fascinating. So everything we're experiencing in our sense, we are conditioned not only by our bodies, our senses, but we're conditioned by the planet that we're living on. This planet is basically accommodating our karma. It is this place that we are, which is suitable for living entities in bodies like ours, not just in terms of space, but in terms of time. Prabhupada continues. Similarly, in the region of still higher planetary systems, the duration of day and night is still greater than in the heavenly planets. The 4 yugas are calculated in terms of the heavenly calendars, and accordingly are 12,000 years in terms of the heavenly planets. This is called a Divya Yuga, and 1,000 Divya Yugas make one day of Brahma. So Divya Yuga, for those who are familiar, of course, is the 4 yugas. One Divya Yuga includes Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Or if you want to be smart, Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, which means 3, and Kali Yuga. But of course, most Yuga cycles, the Treta comes third. 3. But in this particular Yuga cycle, Dwapara Yuga comes third. It happens in nature, doesn't it? Because Krishna had to come. So we're in a special, quite unique Yuga cycle, one could say. And each Yuga cycle is 4.32 million years as experienced on the Earth. Prabhupada here, however, is saying in higher planets, it's not so long. But these Yuga cycles is something which is experienced not just on the Earth, but in other planets as well, higher planets as well. In other words, I think someone was asking this once in a class. I can't remember who asked who, but do the higher planets also, do they have a Kali Yuga? And the answer is yes, they do. Antaranga Prabhu is agreeing, so I know I'm on the right track. So other planets also have a Kali Yuga and a Satya Yuga, but it's relative to the standard of living on their respective planet. So let's say, for example, say, I don't know, a Gandharva or some celestial being, and their Kali Yuga may just be 1,000 years or something like that. But, and for them, it won't be as bad as it is here, because their overall standard of living is higher. Just like if a Hollywood star has a bad day, he may lose his $1 million mansion. But that's as far as it's going to go. But do you see what I mean? In other words, they may have to relatively step down a bit. But then when the Satya comes, they get it back. So similarly, humankind, we have a very hard time on the Earth. We're more susceptible, more vulnerable, if you like, to the Yuga cycle system. Since the Vedic times, actually, since the times of before the Mahabharata period, actually, the degradation spiritually and also in some ways materially has gone very rapidly over the last 5,000 or 6,000 years. Prabhupada writes, the 30 kalpas of Brahma each have a name based on significant events that occurred during that kalpa. So what we find in the Puranas is actually a list of different kalpas. So we actually have an idea, and they're named according to the highlight of what happened in that day of Brahma. So we know that there's creation going on in this month, as it were. We have a month of Brahma tracked. So, kalpas are Brahma's days only, and he has to live months and years, up to 100 of his years. So we can just imagine how many creations there are in just a kalpa. Creations and sub-creations. Remember, at the end of each Diva Yuga, there's a partial annihilation of mankind and the earth. At the end of Kali Yuga, everything will be more or less finished. Kalki Avatar will come and finish whoever's off. And the demigods come to the earth and they reboot it. They reboot it with a new piece of software. The demigods basically start replenishing the earth again after humankind has basically ruined everything. And it'll be pretty bad. I wouldn't recommend we keep taking birth till we're there. But anyway, it will be pretty bad. However, then there are Vikalpas, which are generated by the breathing of Mahavishnu, as stated in the Brahma Samhita. The Brahmas live only during the breathing period of Mahavishnu. And the one life, by our calculation, as I mentioned, what the universe lasts for about 100 of Brahma's years, which is 311 trillion, 40 billion Earth years. Give or take a few years here and there. That's how we experience it on this Earth. The Earth wouldn't even last that long. Yet, to Mahavishnu, to Brahma, it's 100 years, a lifetime for him. Even him, it's quite long, in a sense. But to Mahavishnu, what is it? How insignificant are we? What a challenge is that to our ego? No matter how famous we are, whether we're Julius Caesar or whether we're some dictator from the past or a dictator from the future or a famous actor or singer or politician or football player even, whatever we are, it is all very insignificant when compared with the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. We are not just, I was going to say we're like atoms at Krishna's lotus feet, but actually we're like subatomic particles, actually, when you really analyze the time periods of this. And that is also related to space. Prabhupada finishes that purport by saying that all these are due to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for no one else is the master of all creation. So Prabhupada here is reminding the reader, okay, you've got Brahma, you've got Lord Shiva, they've all got roles when it comes to the universe, and they've got Vishnu as the maintainer, but the original Vishnu, the origin of Vishnu, the origin of Mahavishnu, of course, is the four-armed Narayan forms, but the supreme planet in the spiritual sky is Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan, the origin of all Vaikuntha planets and all Narayan forms. So that's wonderful to think about these things. Of course, a little bit more gruesome detail. There's a yuga cycle, times that by 71, and you get one manvantara. That would be a lifetime of an Indra, actually, or a Manu, like Vaishvata Manu, or Swayambhava Manu, or Tara Manu, different Manus. 14 Manus, that would make one day, one kalpa of Lord Brahma. So incredible, really. So sometimes we read about Lord Indra, don't we? Or we read about Manu. But actually, that's okay, we can read about Indra. But actually, the thing is, Indra is a post, Manu is a post. It's like a president or GBC or a kind of a prime minister or a president. There were different people take that role on as Lord Brahma's day proceeds. Like that. And there were many Lord Brahmas. Brahma is also a post. You know, they've got, I'm a Brahma, which Brahma are you? I've got 20 heads, I've got 1 million, you know. It's a post. But they're in charge, or they're creating different universes of different sizes. And our universe is actually a very small one in comparison with the other universes that come out of the pores of Mahavishnu. So, talking about small, yes indeed, I would say. But I just want to finish off in the last 5-10 minutes, actually, just to kind of add that the purpose of the Puranas is for spiritual progression. Nevertheless, encoded within the Puranas is not just this kind of spiritual science and relative time and space we've been talking about, but even science which is recognizable and respectable, or would be respected by scientists of today. Some of the work of Sadaputa Prabhu, who was a founder, charter member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute in the mid-1970s. He tried to address this, particularly focusing on the 5th canto, but also the 3rd canto and 2nd canto, which talks a lot about creation, and trying to use that as a tool also to preach to scientists, really, or modern astronomers and so forth. And Dhruta Prabhu, Michael Kramer, who's also done work in that regard, although more closely related to the yuga cycles and the age of anatomy, modern man. Of course, given the yuga cycles we've been talking about, it's very different from the theory of evolution, which suggests that the further you go back in time, the more primitive you get. And now we're at the pinnacle of creation, and now we're fantastic. Not. In some ways, actually, after this 10,000-year golden age, actually, it's going to be devolution. To the point where I mentioned before, it gets so bad, Kalki Avatar will have to come, wipe everyone off, and they'll have to start again. So from the point of view of the demigods, the earth is actually going through a gradual devolution. I mean, there may be ups and downs, you know, but generally, that's the trend. Such is the cycle of birth and death. But to say that today, of course, Sadaputa Prabhu is no longer with us, but his books are kind of like a legacy. And today, the branch of the Bhaktivedanta Institute called the Bhaktivedanta Institute of Higher Studies, the BIHS, discusses these things, not just Prabhupada's books, but other books as well being published by devotees on Vedic cosmology. And there are just to finish off here, there are basically like 3 different schools that tend to come out, I would say. I mean, more or less, can categorize them to 3 schools. One is which is more popular in India, but also certain devotees as well say, we should be presenting these things as they are, without the need, let's say, to connect it with modern science. So, for example, whatever the Bhagavatam says, that's the literal truth. There you go. Take it or leave it. We don't care If it says the universe is only 4 billion miles across, then it's 4 billion miles across. There you are. That's it. End of story. And that is a respectable thing, because we shouldn't really be trying to bring the Bhagavatam and everything and try and bring it under the umbrella of modern science. However, the other school of thought, which I would say could be represented by some of the books of Sadhaputta Prabhu, is trying to form bridges between the two, trying to form correlations. For example, he was looking at history, looking at what the scientists are saying, looking at the Bhagavatam and seeing if there are things in common. And remarkably, there are. He, for example, points out mathematically, and with references to the 5th canto, how his theory, at least, I'm not saying what's what, obviously, it's all under, is that the concentric circles that is described as Bhumandala matches the solar system in terms of size and distance and the planets, which is remarkable. Of course, these things are only known really relatively in the last few centuries in Europe, and yet encoded in the Bhagavatam when it was first spoken. Okay, may have been written down later, but when it was first spoken 5,000 years ago, the same things were known, but it's presented in a different way because it's a different culture. Ultimately, the purpose, as I mentioned, of the Puranas is a devotional one. However, the fact that it's laced with profound scientific knowledge, backed up, I think, by the depth of the spiritual aspect of the scriptures and ancient architecture that you find in India and so forth, gives strength to the knowledge that there was an ancient wisdom and ancient science that has been somehow lost over thousands of years. We in ISKCON are part of a revivalist movement, in a sense. And there is a revival of this greater sense of India's true heritage that is undergoing now in India. And ISKCON appears to be a positive part of that, where through colonization, rule of foreign powers, but also India's own gradual decline because of the Vedic decline, because of the influence of Kali Yuga. Often these things have been dismissed as mythology or unrealistic. How can a human being live for thousands of millions of years? What's scientific about that? Yet, as I've been describing, what the Bhagavatam is telling us is that there's a whole universe out there where time is experienced differently, where there are beings, demigods and upper devas and whatnot, with powers and far beyond our understanding. But finally, there's a third school of thought, the Sadhaputta one, the literalist one, and another one as well, which has come out of devotees such as Rasiraj and Rishiraj who were educated in Juhu, Bombay, which is kind of an interesting one. And it's more to do with the understanding of semantics. I won't go into that, but it's the idea of forming a bridge between science and the scriptures as well, but understanding the use, for example, of metaphor and the multi-use of, or multi-interpretation. So you've got this magic. In other words, you've got more than one meaning in a verse. So you get to the Bhagavatam, for example, 5th canto, and there's different meanings that can come out of it within the same verse, multiple meanings, but each meaning is true. Sukadeva Swami only had just a few days to tell Maharaj Parikshit all about Vedic cosmology. You just had Parikshit had just a few days to live, of course. Geniusly, what we get in the Bhagavatam is an immense amount of information that's condensed. Even the Ramayana appears, but the essence of Ramayana, the creme de la creme of Mahabharata Ramayana, and including Vedic cosmology, is all in the Bhagavatam, but it's in a summary form. If you want more detail, you turn to Mahabharata or Ramayana or something like that. But everything you need to know, the creme de la creme of the Vedanta Sutra, which in itself is the creme de la creme of the Vedas, is there. So it gives you an idea, I think, of almost like a kind of a context. And also, finally, it gives you an idea of the greatness of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the greatness of what Srila Prabhupada has given us, it is barely comprehensible when you think about it. But the more you do think about it and attempt to comprehend it, the more of a jewel you realize the Bhagavatam really is.